Imagine waking up one day to find that everything you've worked for is slipping through your fingers. That's exactly what happened to me when my ex-wife decided she wanted it all. My ex-wife tried to take everything. Here's what I did. I never thought I'd be here, staring at a version of my life I didn't recognize. She was my world, my forever. I thought she was the person I'd grow old with, the one who'd be by my side through everything. But that wasn't what she wanted. She wanted everything I had. And then some. Looking back now, I can see the signs, but at the time, I was just a man in love, holding on to a fading dream. When I met her, she lit up the room. I'll never forget that first time I saw her across the bar, her long auburn hair catching the light, her eyes sparkling with laughter as she talked to her friends. She was beautiful, effortlessly so, and had this magnetic charm that seemed to pull everyone around her into her orbit. She was 28, I was 30, and I felt like the luckiest guy alive when she smiled at me, this blinding, confident grin that could have knocked any guy off his feet. I'm the first to admit that I was pretty ordinary next to her. I've got a kind of rugged look, you could say, not the type to stand out, but I thought I could keep her grounded. I work in sales, and I know my way around a tough negotiation, but I was absolutely out of my league with her. I thought, maybe, she saw something in me that went beyond looks or flashiness. I was dead wrong. The first few years were blissful, or maybe I just wanted to believe they were. She was that woman every guy wanted, and I was the one who got to call her my wife. I was so certain of our future that I ignored any small warning signs, dismissing them as just bumps in the road. But each time we fought, I felt something chipping away inside me, something that I thought love would fix. Then came the arguments over finances. "You're too irresponsible," she'd say, her words stinging like a slap. She came from a world where money was constant, a family business supplying her with a cushion I couldn't match. I thought that was okay, I thought she understood my career had its ups and downs. But every time I was down, she'd look at me with this thin-lipped disapproval, her eyes sharp, judging. It felt like 1,000 cuts. I still remember the look in her eyes the first time I found out about the debt she'd hidden. I'll never forget it, the cold, almost dismissive way she glanced at me as if it wasn't her problem. I had never felt so small. Somewhere along the line, I convinced myself it would all work out. I wanted so desperately to believe that we'd make it through. But the more I tried, the more distant she became, like a stranger living in the same home. I didn't know how to reach her anymore. I wanted to believe in us, but it was like I was holding on to a ghost. The breaking point came 2 years in, a night that still feels like a bruise on my heart. She'd been coming home later and later, each time with vague excuses that I tried to overlook. I was afraid to push too hard, afraid that maybe I'd get an answer I didn't want. But one night, when she walked through the door, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, like I didn't even want to hear the answer. She just looked at me, coldly, her green eyes almost mocking. "Out," she replied, as if that one word explained everything. It tore at me. I wanted to understand, I wanted to believe there was still a chance. But all I could see was that distance in her eyes, a distance that felt like a chasm I could never cross. Nights passed, each one with more excuses, more distance, more doubts. I felt myself slipping, doubting everything, even my own sanity. "You're being paranoid," she'd say, brushing me off like I was the crazy one, like I was losing myself in some imaginary jealousy. Then came the night that shattered me. She'd gone out again, leaving her phone on the counter. I can still remember the way my hands shook as I reached for it. I didn't want to invade her privacy, didn't want to be that person who had to snoop. But something deep inside told me that if I didn't look, I'd never know the truth. And that truth was already burning a hole in me. The messages were there, waiting. Messages to some guy I'd never met, filled with words she'd once said to me. Words that used to mean something. As I scrolled, it was like every piece of my heart cracked, one message at a time. Plans for weekends she'd spent with friends, flirtations that made me feel sick to my stomach. She had given pieces of herself to someone else, pieces I thought belonged to us. When she came home that night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. How long has this been going on? My voice shook, barely masking the raw pain that tore through me. And that's when she looked at me, really looked at me, with a smirk that made my blood run cold. "Oh, don't act like you're surprised," she sneered. "Did you really think I'd be happy with someone like you forever?" I felt my heart shatter. Everything I thought we had, everything I thought we were, it was all a lie. I was just someone she used, someone who wasn't good enough. And she didn't even care. That night, I packed a bag, my hands numb and trembling, and I walked out. I left the life I'd built, the dreams I'd held on to, because I knew she'd already thrown them away. But leaving didn't end it. If anything, it was only the beginning of what she had planned. Leaving wasn't the release I thought it would be. The emptiness, the quiet, every little thing reminded me of her, from the scent lingering on my clothes to the photos we had framed together. I found myself lost in an apartment I barely recognized as mine, haunted by memories I could never seem to escape. Each day was another reminder that everything I'd built, everything I thought we'd shared, had been shattered. I spent those first few weeks trying to make sense of it all. I replayed every conversation, every moment, searching for something, some sign I should have seen, some clue that might have prepared me for the betrayal. But nothing made sense. I was drowning in the what-ifs and if-onlys, spiraling in a storm of regrets that only seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Friends tried to help, they'd tell me, "You're better off," and "It's time to move on." But they didn't understand. I didn't just lose a relationship, I lost a future I'd built in my mind, a life I was sure was real. But she wasn't done with me yet. About a month after I'd left, I received a notice from her lawyer. She wasn't just done with the marriage, she wanted everything she could possibly get. The house, the savings we'd built together, even my car. She'd filled the letter with accusations, painting me as someone I barely recognized. It was like she'd turned our marriage into a weapon, using every moment we'd shared to take more, to hurt more. I can't describe what that felt like. After all the emotional devastation, she was now trying to get me financially, too. And the worst part? The smug, almost amused look she'd have during our meetings. She showed no remorse, no shame, just this chilling indifference that left me feeling hollow. She'd look at me across the table with those piercing green eyes, and I could see her triumph in every glance. This was all just a game to her, a chance to get as much as she could and leave me with nothing. I became a ghost of myself. There were days I couldn't even bring myself to get out of bed, weighed down by a sadness that felt endless. She'd taken everything, my trust, my love, and now, my stability. I'd always prided myself on being a steady, grounded guy, but she'd made me question everything. Every decision, every choice to trust her, it felt like one big mistake I couldn't take back. The memories of her felt like open wounds. I'd remember the way she used to smile at me, the way her laughter would fill a room, and I'd wonder how any of it had been real. How could someone I'd loved so deeply be the same person who now seemed so eager to destroy me? The worst part was, I could still feel the love buried somewhere beneath all the anger and pain. Some part of me still wanted to reach out to her, to believe that the person I'd fallen in love with was still in there somewhere. But each time that thought crept in, I reminded myself of her words, her cold indifference, and the way she'd torn apart everything we'd built without a second thought. One night, after yet another sleepless stretch, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and the person staring back was someone I barely recognized. I looked hollow, worn down, like I'd aged a decade in a few months. And in that moment, something clicked. I realized I couldn't let her take any more from me. She'd already taken too much, my sense of self, my peace, my hope. I wasn't going to let her finish me off. I decided to fight back. I couldn't undo what she'd done to our marriage, but I could stop her from stripping away what little I had left. I hired a lawyer, a tough one, someone who came highly recommended and didn't pull any punches. And I'll be honest, stepping into those meetings again, facing her, was like reliving the betrayal all over. Each time I saw her, that pain resurfaced. But I clung to one thing: I wasn't going to let her break me. The process was brutal, filled with long nights, emotional turmoil, and endless battles over things that shouldn't have mattered. But each victory, no matter how small, felt like a step toward reclaiming a piece of myself. Slowly, I started to feel a spark of strength that I hadn't felt in a long time, a reminder that I was more than the man she'd left broken. Months passed, and though the memories still stung, I began to see glimpses of a life without her. I moved into a new apartment, one that didn't hold the ghosts of our past. It wasn't easy. I still found myself looking at photos, sometimes wishing things had turned out differently. But each day, the pain dulled just a little bit more. I started going out again, reconnecting with old friends, rediscovering parts of myself I'd buried during our marriage. One day, I received the final court ruling. She'd taken what she could, but she hadn't won it all. And that felt like a victory, a small spark of hope. I'd made it through, and I was still standing. The man who had once let his love for her define him had found something deeper: resilience. Looking back now, I can see the scars she left behind, the marks of a love that should have been a partnership but became a battle. I'd always thought love was the answer to everything, that if you loved someone deeply enough, you could get through anything. But I'd learned, the hard way, that love without respect, without honesty, is just a mirage, a trap disguised as something beautiful. I still catch myself wondering sometimes, what was real and what was just the fantasy I'd built up in my mind. But I've stopped looking back with regret. I don't wish her ill, but I also don't wish her well. She was a chapter in my life, one that taught me more about myself than any other. I realized that no matter how much someone means to you, if they can't see your worth, they don't deserve a place in your life. I'm still healing, still piecing myself back together. But I've found a kind of peace in moving forward, in knowing that I survived something that could have destroyed me. I'm stronger now, a bit tougher, but I still believe in love. I just know that next time, I'll be more careful about who I give my heart to. And maybe one day, I'll look back on all of this as just another story, a lesson learned. Until then, I'm taking it one day at a time, hoping that someday the scars will fade into something I can wear with pride. Because I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. Looking back, part of me still wonders, was it my fault for ignoring the red flags? Or did she simply change into someone I never truly knew? If you've ever been through something like this, if you felt the sting of betrayal or had to start over when the person you trusted most turned their back on you, then you understand how hard it can be to rebuild. So tell me, do you think there are signs we miss when love blinds us? Or was this just my fate all along? If you enjoyed this story and want more like it, hit that subscribe button and join us here on Tales from the Feed for more real-life stories and heartbreaks, each with a lesson we can take away. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take on who was in the right or wrong.